Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video I'm going to be taking a look at some more leaked information that I've been able to get hold of, this time in regards to the future of British aviation. Now what I'm going to be talking about is mostly a few aircraft which could be late tier 5, possibly also early tier 6. Now please note, despite me thinking that these are fairly trustworthy sources these leaks have come from, do take it with a grain of salt, because either it might just never happen, it might be a lie, or it might take a very long time for these vehicles to materialize in game. So do take it with a grain of salt, although I feel these are fairly trustworthy sources. But anyway, starting off, we have got obviously a Discord conversation screenshot. Looking at this, one of my sources basically says, gives me a small list. The Hunter F5 and the F6. I think more Hunters are highly likely to be seen in game, mainly due to the fact that we already have the F1, and they could always folder up some, do a folder of Hunters after the F1, possibly the F5 and the F6 in a folder, before moving on to tier 6. Also the Swift F1, which, you know, I'm not surprised to see. It wasn't the most popular aircraft in real life, but looking at the performance, I can see how it would fit into at least the current meta of top-tier jet aircraft. Also, an English Electric Lightning with a Canadian modification to carry SEAD weaponry, which SEAD weaponry is basically suppression of enemy air defences, similar role to that of the F4G Wild Weasel that I spoke about in my previous tier 6 leak video. Now, it does say, of course, the Canadians never used it, but it was modified for the British. But I did look it up, and I couldn't find any mention of it, so for now, in this video at least, I'm just going to talk about the general English Electric Lightning, rather than that specific version. And I also asked, what was the C-Vixen prototype? Now, my source did mention something about the C-Vixen prototype. A few people have mentioned it, and he gave me some more information on that, but that info I'm going to talk about a bit later on, because that's something I want to look at in a bit more detail. But starting off with Hunter F5, the F5 is effectively an F4 Hunter, but it's been modified with a Sapphire 101 engine, and these weren't actually built by Hawker. These were actually built by Armstrong Whitworth. They built about 105 of them at their factory in Coventry, so not a huge amount of them. It is fairly common for aircraft companies, at least in that time, to license out building of certain variants to other companies, mainly just to increase the production rate for possibly foreign air forces that were purchasing the aircraft, or even just the Royal Air Force itself to get them more aircraft faster. Now, the F5 isn't something I want to look in huge detail at. I feel that's not exactly one of the more well-known variants. So what I'm going to move on to and look at in a bit more detail is the F6 variant. Now, this is the sort of final main production variant of the Hawker Hunter. This is a single-seat clear-weather interceptor. This was actually powered by a Rolls-Royce Avon. This was a 203 version of the Avon. And, you know, this could produce over 10,000 pounds of thrust, so it is a very powerful engine. And the F6 also had a revised wing design, which, first off, the leading edge had a dogtooth sort of design. The dogtooth design effectively helps to sort of like vortex generators on the wing, if you know what they are. It helps direct the air a bit better over their ailerons and control surfaces to help improve the sort of mostly the low speed maneuverability and controllability of the aircraft, because obviously if there's more energized and focused air going across the ailerons or just general control surfaces, it's actually going to produce a far better response, and therefore the aircraft should be more maneuverable at lower speeds. But this revised wing design also included 4 hard points, which could mount some pretty interesting stuff. First off, they could mount up to 7,400 pounds of provisions. This included 4 rocket pods, each of which contained 18 SNEB 68mm rockets, so quite a few rockets there, definitely going to be useful for tank RB in terms of ground pounding. Or you could carry 32 Hispano rockets, of which were 80mm unguided rockets. Now, the thing I find interesting is that this aircraft could also carry either 4 AIM-9 Sidewinders or 4 AGM-65 Mavericks. Now, these missiles, of course, are a bit more advanced. It's likely that if we see this variant of the Hunter as an early tier 6, we will be seeing these missiles, and it might turn out that this is one of the first tier 6 added to the game. After, most likely, the Gamescom 2019 announcement, this will be in that first update, and it'll be sort of the British aircraft to kick off tier 6, and we'll have this weaponry. Now, in terms of guns, again, as with all the Hunters, you have the 430mm Aiden cannons with 150 rounds per gun. In terms of performance, mainly focusing on the speed and the climb rate, the speed is Mach 0.94, which is about 715 miles per hour, or 1,150 kilometers per hour. This is at sea level. This is not high altitude speed, this is sea level speed. Definitely quite impressive in that regard. And in terms of climb rate, you can do 17,000 feet per minute, or 87 meters per second, which, you know, that means you can effectively take off from the airfield and be at a very respectable cruising altitude of around 30 to 40,000 feet within 3 or 4 minutes, which will definitely be a massive help when using this aircraft, especially since this is the kind of aircraft where you should be using boom and zoom tactics and not dogfighting tactics. Well, that's all I really wanted to talk about in terms of the Hunter. Now let's move on to the Swift Mark 1. Now the Swift is a fairly simple single-seat jet fighter. This again has an Avon engine, only it's a different variant. This is the RA7 variant, or the 109, so obviously it's an earlier variant than that in the F6 Hunter, a bit less powerful, and that does show at sea level it only goes 2 miles an hour slower than that of the Hunter F6, which is, it goes 713 miles an hour, or 1,148 kilometers per hour, so only a little bit slower there. The rate of climb, though, has suffered quite a bit. It could do 14,600 feet per minute, or 74.5 meters per second. That's more than 10 meters per second less than the Hunter F6. And in terms of weapons, it's fairly simple. From what I can find, it can't carry additional payload. It only has 2 30mm Aiden cannons with 150 rounds per gun. So not much actual payload there. It's just a basic fighter with some basic guns. Not a huge amount of ammo, because obviously with the Aiden cannons they're very fast firing, so those rounds will run out fairly quickly. So I think this is the kind of aircraft where you need to get in quickly, shoot some stuff, get back to base. That's really the kind of tactic you want to use with this. Now, I did mention that the Lightning modified with the suppression of enemy air defenses capabilities. So modified by Canada for the RAF. Bit of confusion there. I did ask my source, and they weren't sure on what it actually was. So what I'll do is, it seems like if we're going to be getting a version of the Lightning that's more specialized and a bit less production, with not many of them actually modified or built, we're definitely going to be getting the standard production Lightning for sure. So what I did was I went ahead and I got the stats for a basic version of the Lightning, the F3 variant, and that's what we're going to go through now in terms of stats. So the max speed is exactly Mach 2, or 1,300 miles an hour, or 2,100 kilometers per hour at 36,000 feet. So that's at altitude. In terms of climb rate, it's not as much as I actually thought. It's not much more than the Hunter F9, because that sits at 87 meters per second. This only sits at 100 meters per second, so not a huge amount more. Of course, there is a massive speed increase at altitude, but in terms of general climb rate, it's not a huge amount more. 20,000 feet per minute though, so that does mean again within 2 to 3 minutes you can easily be at 40 to 60,000 feet in terms of cruising altitude. Again, the Lightning definitely not a dogfighter. This is a boom and zoom aircraft, or a long range sort of missile engager. In terms of guns, you have 2 30mm Aidens, which are the 30 mils with the 150 rounds per gun. Again, like with on the Swift, these guns will run out fairly fast. The guns do drain quickly due to the high fire rate, so that's something to be careful of. In terms of hard points, you have 2 under fuselage mounting points, which are effectively side by side on the canopy but lower down on the fuselage, and then also 2 overwing mounting pylons, but as far as I can tell they're only for additional fuel tanks. They are not for missiles. And in terms of weaponry, it can either carry 2 de Havilland fire streaks or 2 red tops made by Hawker Siddeley. So they're the only weapons that the Lightning can carry, which, you know, fairly basic. 2 guns, 2 missiles, pretty basic there. The speed's very good, and the climb rate is fairly decent still. Please note this is only the F3 I'm looking at. If we get a later variant of the Lightning, obviously it's going to be better. Now finally, we can see this Sea Vixen prototype. Now, as you can see with the conversation, my source basically says they've been working on the prototype because it's the only one with guns. Now later, the production variant of the Sea Vixen did not have guns. It was only the 4 missiles. It had the 4, I believe it was 4 missiles at least. So it had 4 missiles and no guns. Now this variant is the prototype, which was fitted with 4 30mm Aiden cannons with again 150 rounds per gun. Now apparently Gaijin started working on this back in 1.5 1.57, very long time ago there for working on this model, which is hopefully going to be added to the game soon, if what I'm being told is fairly true. And apparently the skin was actually done, and my source heard about the skin for this aircraft being done on October 17th. Not too long ago, which does mean that it's highly likely, and I think Gaijin, if they complete the skin about a month ago, it's highly likely that they have had enough time before they did the skin to finish the model, then to implement it into the game. So I feel, you know, this update, we have a high possibility, possibly, of seeing a new British, possibly naval jet, possibly a jet at the end of the heavy fighter line. No way of telling this early. Now, I have been told, though, it is not a priority by Gaijin to add this to the game. This is not a priority, but, you know, it'd be a nice thing to see, in my opinion. But yeah, in terms of weapons, though, again, it has got those Aidens. Now, in terms of unguided weaponry, this has 6 hardpoints. But in terms of unguided weaponry, it can only carry 4. It can only carry things on 4 of those hardpoints, being the rocket pods with the 18 SNEB 68mm rockets, which are unguided. In terms of performance, max speed of Mach 0.91, which is 690 miles per hour or 1,110 kilometers per hour at sea level. So slightly slower there than the Swift and the Hunter, but not by much. And if you include how much bigger this aircraft is, it's actually not too bad. The one thing where it does suffer a lot, though, in comparison with those 2 aircraft, is the climb rate. This thing can only do 9,000 feet per minute, or roughly 46 meters per second, which is a massive drop down from those 2 aircraft. But you really should consider the size of this aircraft in comparison with those 2 fairly small interceptor fighter type things. This is a far bigger aircraft that mostly, I think, was designed not exactly to be an interceptor. It's a carrier-based ground strike aircraft from what I can tell, especially since it does carry a lot of payload and those rocket pods as well. So yeah, but I think this could be a very nice ender for either the naval line after the Sea Venom, or possibly a way to just, at least maybe even temporarily, just put a jet at the end of that heavy fighter line, as this is a twin-engine aircraft. You could chuck it at the end of that heavy fighter line, just to give that line something in Tier 5. But that's all I have for today. They're the leaks I've got. That's the information I have. So take it however you will. If you don't want to believe it, fair enough. If you do, then thanks, I guess, for listening. But yeah, so thanks a lot for watching the video. If you did enjoy or you found it interesting, please consider leaving a like. Maybe even subscribe to my channel. If you do, that will be massively appreciated. In the description, there are links to a few of my friends' Discord or YouTube pages, so do go give them a look. There's also my Patreon, my Live.War Thunder profile, and also my Discord server invite in the description as well. So give all those things a look. And give me some feedback if you want to, or just come join my Discord server and hang out. But yeah, so thanks again for watching, and I will see you in the next one.